We are going to dive more into this workbook that I put out there. If anybody, Daniel's back there. If anybody wants a copy of this, the little book that we're kind of working through, if anybody wants a copy of it, would you raise your hand and maybe Daniel can run one over to you? One over here, maybe a pen too. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you. We'll dive into that in a second. And as we're going through this, part of my goal has been to consider what reimagine church along the way. Don't quite know what that looks like yet, but one of the goals of this message series is also to bring people to be able to say, my God, when they speak of God. God has no grandchildren. I'm not up here to tell you, believe in Jason's God, and then you say, man, Jason's God is great, and then I believe in Jason's God. My goal is to accommodate and to encourage experience of God himself, so that you can say, my God, this is my God. I've experienced my God. And along the way, as we're doing going through this sermon series, we do have, Casey, can you put up the question slide? So if you have questions, you can go to slido.com and it has a spot where you can put this number in. You can also scan the QR code with your phone. You can submit questions there. Other people can see your questions and they can vote on the best questions. But yeah, if you end up with some questions, please feel free to submit here, and we can try to cover those in future messages. Just part of, I want to make sure that I'm not just force feeding anyone. I'm not here to just tell you believe in my God. And so questions are great. We can interact with these things. So submit questions there, and as we go into this, I guess. It is fitting that last song was just that our story is of a beautiful Savior. And it struck me this last week as we we're going through the Gospel of Matthew. We heard Jesus say that my yoke is light. He said, my yoke is easy, my burden's light. That's the gospel. How many of us feel the gospel that way? I know that as a kid, I did not feel a light gospel. I didn't feel a gospel that made me feel lighter. I did not feel a gospel that brought incredible joy to my life. Paul says the gospel's freedom. And how many people still hear the gospel like, I have the gospel, and they haven't found freedom? Part of this message series is going to be to try to wrestle with why we may not find that. Why haven't we found that yet? And to offer ideas, because I love it. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. If we're getting the same result with our theology, then maybe we need to change our theology a little bit somewhere here and there, because maybe something's not working right. And if we're not getting the result that Jesus said the gospel will bring, maybe we need to keep working on our theology. Invite God to us and to illuminate us further. And so we're going to begin. I didn't know where to start on this. I've kind of been going, do I start here? Do I start there? Because ultimately what you're trying to do when you build a house, it's like saying, you know what, I'll start with this nail right here. Or I'll start with, look at how beautiful this piece of plywood is. It's hard to know where to start on it, because everything combines to make a beautiful thing. But sometimes you start with the pieces and you lay them out, and at some point you just got to dive in somewhere. So we're going to dive in this morning. In December, if you'll throw up the next slide there. In December, I drove past, and I love this, the local church. The last line, Jesus is all. They said, you can go to the next one, and it kind of zooms in for those that want to see it closer. It says, where everybody is somebody. And then that last line, and Jesus is all. Have we truly realized that? Have we embraced that Jesus is all? So we're going to start with Jesus. So you can go to, in your book, there's a page that looks like this. It says God at the top. And so we're going to start there, and we're going to start to look at who God is. And again, for those online, there's a PDF at narrativechurch.com if you go to resources, and we're going to dive into this. And we're going to look at who is God. I'm going to try something here. If you go to the next slide, Casey, it says web page. It'll be blank for a moment. But let's see if this works. see if I can get this to show up. We'll see. Give me a second. There we go. See what happens. Technological difficulties. I had it working before the experiment. We're gonna see. Give me one more second, otherwise we'll just go through it and you'll have to fly blind. Let's see. Start. Go away from it and then back to it. Let's see if it. Let's see. There we go. There we go. All right. There's the page. It might be small, but at least we have a little something up here. So, shared with you last week about my theology and about how I met Jesus and he changed my life, and he told me from internally that he's always been there waiting for me. My perception, as Paul says, our perceptions, we have a veil in our mind and we don't perceive where God is. But Paul talks about in Galatians on the road to Damascus, he says, Jesus was pleased to reveal himself, not to me. Paul says, Jesus was pleased to reveal himself in me. Jesus was always there. Jesus is what Colossians says, that all things were created by him and in him, and Jesus is in all things, keeping their existence going. And Paul says, Jesus revealed himself in me. I didn't know he was there, but he took away the veil of my mind. And so as we look at God and who is God, we have, in case you want to know big words, I have a couple big words there, and then we're going to look at who God is, but ontology. Ontology, it's ontos, and then the ending is taken from logos, from word, and so with ontology, you also have the word is being. Ontos is being. And so we have God as his being in that one big word. With praxeology, this comes from the Greek that actually means doing or the way of something. And it's logos again. And so logos is for words. And so these are words about God's being, the study of his being. And then it's words about his doing, the way he does things, or the study of that, and other ways that, interestingly, as I've been heading towards this Sunday, it's come up quite a bit. And I've heard several people over these last couple of weeks talk about this. And so over on the being of God, this is what I talked about. This is information. And over here, this is with his doing. This is incarnation. You get the information of God, but then the incarnation is the living it out in the flesh. Another way that I heard it put is over here. This is nature. What is the nature of God? And this is action. The things that are born out of God. And what we find with God is, we can see that God is holy. Who and how come together in a way that's unbroken. For me, in the military, I was taught to be an interrogator, and you've probably heard these questions. You always ask people, who, what, where, when, why. These are the questions that we're taught to ask questions about anything. And those are the questions that are drilled in your mind as an interrogator. You have to ask them about everything. And for me, what works for me is who and how. Who is God and how is he? I was just joking with a friend last week about the who and the how of God. Sounds like Dr. Seuss. Need to write a Dr. Seuss book on God. The who's and the hows of God. And when the who and the how come together perfectly, flawlessly, that is what sets God apart as holy. Our word holy actually comes from wholeness. It comes from being whole. And God is whole and he is holy because he is unlike any of us. Whole in his who and his how. They complement each other. There is no disparity between them. And so we say, okay, well, who is God? Big question that almost everybody asks at some point in their life. Jesus says, I do everything that the Father does. And what we read in Hebrews, so over here on the who side, if we were to split this, on the who side, we have Hebrews 1:3 that says Jesus is God. So when we're making a list of who is God, top of the list, Jesus. Jesus is God. You also have along these lines, you have Colossians 1:15 and 19. This is where Paul says, in the person of Jesus, the wholeness of God resided. Jesus was not split from God. The wholeness of God lived in Jesus. And so I say, okay, great. That's who God is. Well, who else is God? Talked about it before, but what I experienced at my core when God spoke to me is 1 John 4:8. It's love. God is love. This love is not any love. This love is agape. It is a love that isn't started by doing anything of worth. It's a love that is eternal because nothing starts it and so nothing can end it. Nothing ends it, so it doesn't need to be restarted, rekindled. What we find then is as we're filling out this page and we're trying to figure out who is this God who I'm wondering, can I trust this God? We follow agape over to 1 Corinthians 13. 1 Corinthians 13 defines what agape love is. And what I did in the workbooks is the second page in the workbook is 1 Corinthians 13. Everywhere that it says agape love, agape is God. You can put God in there. And that's a list of who God is. Paul is saying God is agape, then guess what? Here's what agape is. Here, without this love, nothing matters. Why? Because that's all that God is. And so when you're looking through that list, what you end up with is that God is unhurried. How often in my life have I felt the rush, the pressure, that things need fixed today, things need fixed yesterday. And yet we considered several years ago the 3-mile-per-hour God. Jesus didn't come at a time when there's jets and cars and his ministry could travel the globe within hours. Jesus came at a time in history when he walked. He seemed rather unhurried. So love is unhurried. The list continues. Love is pleasant. Here's a tough one. Love is happy with authenticity. Love loves our real self. How often do we come to church? Go to the grocery store? Go anywhere else and we feel ashamed of who we really are? No one will like me if I'm who I really am. So I need to put on my face. I need to put on my persona. Then they'll like me. But they're not liking you anyway because they don't know the real you. We've talked about Jesus saying, when you come to me as a false self, when you come to me as a hypocrite, you put on the front. I'm going to say, go away, I never knew you. It's not that Jesus doesn't know you. It's that Jesus says, I will not recognize the false self behind which you're dying. You can't come to me and say, God, here I was as a charitable person. Look at me. Value me based on charity. Value me based on the grand things I did with my life. And Jesus says, I don't know that person who needs to be valued based on what you've done. I know the person who's valued because I made you, because I continue to build your existence, because I continue to be in you, as Paul figured out. Community that lifts shame is a community that invites authenticity. Agape love is happy with authenticity. Here's one. As we go on, agape love covers all things. No matter what you do, as Jesus showed at his table of communion, it's already covered. It's already been covered. Judas, you're going to kill me. You have set the pieces in motion to put me on the cross. And yet, here's communion. It's already covered. Agape love, these are all the positives I'm taking out of 1 Corinthians 13. Agape love trusts all things. How many times have we messed up and we tell someone, I'm going to do better. I'm going to do better this time. And they doubt us. Like, oh, I've heard this a dozen times, and you still will fail me. Agape love trusts in that moment and says, okay, you're going to do better. And when you don't, I've covered it because I've covered all things. So therefore, because I've covered everything, I can trust everything. Which then builds onto the next one. Agape love expects all things. This expectation is anticipation, excited anticipation. It's saying all things. I wait expectantly. Even nature itself, which is its creation, is born from God and sustained by God. It waits expectantly for the final salvation of everything. There is this expectation of all good, this all things. Interesting study on its own, and maybe we'll get to it. But this phrase, all things, is a phenomenal study. And it looks for the good of all things. It says that all things are in Jesus. All things work together for the good of those who trust Jesus. But then you flip around and Jesus says, all things have been entrusted to me. I have done the work of reconciling all things. I will change all things. And so it has this expectation of all things, and That's where then it goes to the next one. It eagerly waits all things. It doesn't grow impatient. How often do we say, yes, I see the light at the end of the tunnel for this person. Hurry up and get there. I am waiting impatiently for you to fix yourself. Or do I look at myself and I say, what is wrong with you? Why aren't you better, faster, sooner? Hurry up. Agape love takes the pressure off. It eagerly waits. It doesn't impatiently wait. It eagerly waits. It goes, man, when you get to there, it's going to be beautiful, and I'm waiting for you in the meantime. And here's the key then, as we finish the positive list. This love that is who God is. It never fails. Love will not fail. As we go on with the list here, how I picture it is how not. What are not the ways of God? How is God not? Paul continues his list on agape. And here is the first one. He says, God is not, it may say envious or jealous, but here's how the Greek says it. It is boiling. God doesn't boil. He doesn't hit this rage moment. He doesn't get hot and heated. God is not conceited. The church I grew up in said that God does everything for himself. Everything. He damns people to hell for his own glory so he can show what a powerful punisher he is. He saves others for his own glory to show what a powerful savior he is. Everything is centered on God. Paul in this list says God's not conceited. He's not this self-centered, and he goes on. The next word in the Greek, he's not puffed up. He's not indecent. Here's a big one. I didn't know this as a kid from my church. He's not demanding. Love doesn't demand. The question is, then how does love never fail? We'll get to that. But love isn't demanding. Going on with the boiling and envious, Paul says love cannot be provoked. You cannot provoke agape love. It is eternal. It is patient. And so therefore its patience does not run out. How? How does this work? Paul goes on to say this is how it works. This love is not scorekeeping. How is God? He is not a scorekeeper. Things don't finally add up to where love boils over. Love doesn't have to boil over because love doesn't demand its own way. Love isn't saying, okay, I also pass a 3-strike law. You're on strike 2. Wait for 3 strikes. And then I've hit my limit. Love doesn't say that here. You don't hit strike 3 because you never hit strike 2 because love never counts strike 1. It doesn't keep score. And then the last one from 1 Corinthians 13, love is not okay with injustice. Would you pause for just a minute? If you wrote down this list, or I'll go back to here. If this is all you knew about God, what would you think? This is the most fundamental, basic definition of God. Ignore everything else for a moment and look at this. Would you rejoice in this God? Would you feel less shame with this God? Might the God of this gospel suddenly feel light? Wouldn't a life under this, where score isn't kept, where patience is eternal, where you know love will never fail, wouldn't a life under this just feel light? One more. A little bit earlier in 1 John. 1 John 1:5, I believe. Yes, it is 1 John 1:5. Who God is. We're looking at who. God is light. God is light. Just like we considered a list of how God is not out of 1 Corinthians 13, 1 John 1:5 gives us who not is God. God is not darkness. Wherever there are dark things, wherever there is darkness in ourselves, wherever we see darkness in others, it's a void of God. Darkness has no being. God is existence itself, and from God everything exists. If darkness is not in God, then darkness cannot exist. Darkness has no being. What it turns darkness into is a vacuum. It is a vacuum that is absent of what? It's absent of who God is, which is love. This God is beautiful to me. This God is the God who I met, who revolutionized my life, and who I can get off track every so often. And I start to keep score on myself. I start to keep score on others. I start to keep score on God. Because I'm like, God, there's 3. I'm not happy with you. But when I recenter myself in agape love, this is light. There is no darkness here. This is a God who is who Jesus said the gospel is. A burden that is light, a yoke that is easy to wear. I can wear this God. This is a God who is found in Jesus, and Jesus is all. For Mother's Day, take a quick little detour. We can get so caught up in Jesus being male, Jesus being the Father personified. And so we look at Jesus as a man and we say, okay, this is the Father personified. God has no gender. God is genderless. And so I need to turn to my reference. I make sure I get the references right. God has no gender. He is described as both male and female. It says God's image. He made male and female within his image. Both are in his image. We're going to get to who humanity is later in the series. But Isaiah 49:15. Isaiah 66:13. God is motherly. If I could write, there we go. Here's a good one. Job 38 describes the womb of God. Psalm 90. I won't write them all down. Psalm 90. Isaiah 42. Deuteronomy 30. Describe God as a birthing mother, a mother in labor giving birth. One of my favorites is Ruth 2:12, Psalm 17, Psalm 91, and again Deuteronomy 32. God is a mother bird, also a hen, or a mother eagle. And then actually, no, this is probably my favorite. Hosea. Hosea describes God as a mother bear. Hosea 13. God is a mother bear. On this Mother's Day, as I was renewed to see the feminine side of God, as God is a mother bird, a mother bear, and a birthing mother. So often now, with our medical devices and our current medical science, we forget that giving birth was a life-endangering process back in the day. So a birthing mother, a mother bird who will defend her chicks to the death, a mother bear who will defend her chicks to the death. The spirit of being a mother. And when I gathered this last week, and it just is highlighted for me, the spirit of being a mother is someone, is a woman who will lay her life down for her offspring. A mother who will lay her life down to bring life into this world as a birthing mother, and a mother who will put herself between death and her offspring. That's what we see lived out in God. It's a beautiful picture. I want to take a moment to invite you. We've been doing this practice of allowing God into our imagination, because God as information is one thing in the right brain. But God as experiential knowledge it is completely different. And God uses, there's a reason I believe God gave us imagination. That's how he meets us. He speaks to our imagination. And in this modern world, we're not used to using our imagination as much as others, I believe, in years gone by. David could write psalms about the beautiful green pastures. He didn't have to go to a movie to help him reimagine green pastures. He could picture it. Back in the days before I could rely on TV and I could rely on the movies, my imagination was much more skilled. We would have been much more skilled in imagining. And we've lost that. I want to re-invite us back to that. I'm going to invite you in a moment to close your eyes and let God meet you. My own experience, I told you about it several weeks ago, where it was a new experience for me. I met God in a hookah lounge. I closed my eyes and said, God, where do you want me to meet you? Where are we going to meet today? And God met me in a hookah lounge, and I was like, why am I here? I haven't thought about this place since I was in Iraq the last time. And then God sat across the table from me as this old Iraqi man. And this vision, I reach out and I take God's hands. And I'm confused as to why I'm meeting him in a hookah lounge. I haven't grown up with a significant degree of comfortable male intimacy, so to speak. I grew up that if there was male intimacy, sexuality could be called into question. I told you about as a child, male intimacy was broken for me by a man who molested me. Male intimacy has been weird for me. It's been only in the last recent years that it's been like male touch to give another guy a hug has been redeemed for me. This is cool. Hey, I love you. And I get to hug someone. It's only been the last few years. And I'm in this hookah lounge and I'm like, what is going on? But this is really cool. And I reach out for God's hands and he takes mine. Jesus takes my hands as an old Iraqi guy. And in Iraq and Afghanistan, while I was there, it was a culture that is on a different level with male intimacy. When you walk down the street and talk to a man, Iraqi man, Afghani man, they take your hand. They don't just take your hand, they intertwine fingers. And so you just meet some random dude on the street and you're like, I need to talk to this guy because he may have information that I know. He says, yeah, let's walk. I'll talk with you. And he reaches for your hand. And you intertwine fingers and you walk down the street and talk about, do you know who's making bombs in town? But it was a place where I had been removed from this culture and I had been put in a culture where I'm like, but this is okay. This is normal. This is kind of cool that men here aren't as hung up as they were where I was from. They aren't hung up on what I experienced as a kid. Jesus takes my hands in this vision and he says, I met you in the hookah lounge because I met you in the culture where it was safest for me to meet you and take your hand as a man. He helped to redeem male touch. It was cool. I was like, okay, this is great. So I offer that to you as a way to say, don't hold back from where God may take you in your imagination. Someone here recently, as we've been doing this exercise, told me to be anonymous, but 2 weeks ago, during our time of just inviting God to speak to us, they met God as an elephant while they were on safari. And I can just imagine this powerful elephant. And they said I could share that they were in a safari jeep and this elephant came up, this big, powerful elephant. And I said, you can come out of the jeep. I'm safe. And they came to the feeling of an overpowering God, and that God just wrapped him in his trunk and loved on him. God can meet you in so many different ways. I invite you right now, close your eyes. Look for a place. Some of you already have a place. Some of you, it's the same place. Where would this God who is light and easy and doesn't keep score, where might he want to meet you today? If you struggle for things to come to mind, you can steal someone else's. You can meet God at my hookah bar if you want. You can meet God out on safari. You can steal a place. You can also, if you're struggling to see a place, you can ask God, why? Why am I struggling? It may come as a word. It may come as a gut feeling, an inkling. But God can begin to work with you on why your imagination feels stopped up. One person I heard that was struggling said, God, why am I struggling? And they immediately just felt, oh, it's my attitude. And their attitude was one of fear. They were scared to meet God. Where's your place? How would God come to you? Often he can come to you the same way. He can come as an elephant again. I just know that I can close my eyes and I'm right back at that hookah bar. And Jesus is right there as that old Iraqi man. As you gaze at Jesus, would you look into the eyes of agape love? What do those eyes say to you? For me, I see eyes that are filled with tears for the hurt I've endured. I see eyes that trust me, even though I'll fail again. I'd invite you to shout and touch agape love. Would you listen for any words that agape love has to speak to you today? I don't know where each of us are, so some of you just sit with agape love. For those who may not be finding themselves able to settle into a place, who may not be seeing Jesus, you can continue to ask. Why? Love will answer. When you listen for words, it's not always clear, vocalized words. Sometimes it's a gut feeling of just compassion and deep, deep love. Sometimes it's an increased inkling of just how valuable you are. The more you tune into love, the more you will learn how love communicates to you. We're going to invite Nate back. You'll hear the kids coming in as they give you one more final part of who God is. Spoke on it a little bit last week. John 10:10. This is the key to reading Scripture. This is the key to understanding what is happening in our world. I don't know where I'm going to put it on this thing that's full, but John 10:10. The enemy comes to kill, to destroy, to steal. Jesus says, I, God, thrust into this world. I come so you can have life in abundance. On the who God is. He's not a stealer. He's not a killer. He's not a destroyer. On the how God is. He's a life amplifier. He builds life in abundance. Seeing God like this just it is light and easy. It is the gospel. We'll have Nate come up and close us in worship as I invite you to continue. If you need to sit there, wherever you found yourself, whatever you felt you need to work through that. Sit there in that while we worship. If you need to stay there, stay with love. Sit there with this agape who's beautiful. Feel in your inner heart that the scoreboard always says 0, because love doesn't keep a tally against you. Sit there and feel what you need to feel during worship. Nate can carry the song if nobody else wants to sing and if they just need to sit with love. Nate can carry the song. Be where you need to be right now.